It's not the water that buried the village of Coldwater Creek. It's the song, a silent, haunting melody that still echoes from the depths, calling new souls to drown in its perfect glassy embrace. Deep within the secluded, mist-shrouded peaks of the Ozark Mountains, nestled among ancient oak and hickory, lies a place locals avoid. It's a valley now filled by the unnaturally still dark waters of Lake Serenity, a reservoir created in 1948, but beneath its surface lies the drowned remains of Coldwater Creek Village, a tight-knit community submerged for the sake of progress. The official story points to eminent domain and a necessary hydroelectric project. However, whispers persist among the mountain folk, tales of a profound, unnatural stillness that fell over the village in its final days, followed by the haunting sound of its church bells ringing relentlessly underwater long after the waters closed over them. These weren't ordinary bells. They carried a chillingly beautiful, sorrowful humming, a melody that seemed to pull at the very fabric of reality, luring the waters ever higher and sealing the villagers' fate. Coldwater Creek became a local legend, its memory fading into obscure county archives and chilling unspoken cautionary tales of the Singing Lake. This story begins with Dr. Elias Thorne, a 42-year-old ethnomusicologist and folklorist, a man who chased vanished harmonies. Elias wasn't interested in traditional ghost hunts. He sought the imprint of sound, the residual acoustic energy of traumatic events, believing that extreme emotional resonance could leave a quantifiable sonic footprint. Coldwater Creek Village, with its legend of phantom underwater bells and the inexplicable drowning of its entire history, was his ultimate horrifying case study. He pored over fragmented, heavily censored government reports from the late 1940s. They hinted at bizarre localized acoustic anomalies detected by early crude sonar equipment and unverified anecdotes from terrified engineers who claimed that on certain nights the lake's surface would ripple with a vibration that wasn't water, carrying faint, distorted whispers from below. Elias believed Lake Serenity's true horror lay not in what it held, but in what it sang, and what it truly wasn't. He never intended for his research to silence him. He certainly never intended for the lake itself to compose his final eulogy. But fragments of his journey, his terrifying descent into the drowned melody survived, captured on his specialized hydrophone. Array drones meticulously transcribed from his biofeedback, suit's internal audio logs, and ultimately retrieved from a meticulously encrypted, partially melted data core, surgically implanted within his abandoned research vehicle found weeks later miles from the lake's desolate perimeter. The first definitive sign that something was irrevocably wrong didn't come from a spectral presence or a sudden chill in the damp, heavy air. It came from the water itself, or rather its utterly defiant acoustic properties. Elias had navigated the treacherous, overgrown logging trails and the dense, mist-shrouded valleys for hours, guided by his advanced sonar mapping and the increasingly erratic readings from his long-range hydrophone detectors. He finally located the perimeter of Lake Serenity, a vast circular expanse of unnaturally still dark water nestled between towering pines. The air hung thick, cold, and strangely devoid of the usual sounds of a healthy mountain lake. No splashing, fish, no distant animal calls, no rustling leaves. Just a profound, suffocating stillness. He spoke into his field recorder, his voice low, professionally detached, though a subtle undertone of profound curiosity, tinged with nascent unease, was already present. November 25th, 10 a.m. Location: Lake Serenity, Ozark Mountains. Ambient acoustic: dampening readings dropping precipitously within 50 meters of the shore. Registers below typical environmental background. Approaches absolute acoustic stillness. This is anomalous. Extreme sound absorption. Consistent with folklore. It's like sailing into a pocket of perfect silence. He paused, listening intently to the unsettling quiet that pressed in on his eardrums. It wasn't just quiet. It was an emptiness of natural sound, an unnerving void that seemed to actively consume all vibration, all noise. He moved deeper onto the lake's surface, his airboat's motor unnaturally loud for a moment, the sound immediately swallowed by the oppressive silence. He found the estimated center of the drowned village, according to his old maps. But then a faint, rhythmic thump, thump, thump resonated from deep beneath the water, a colossal slow beat, like a monstrous muffled heart. It wasn't the sound of settling, sediment, or distant machinery. It was too regular, too powerful, too impossibly alive and contained. It seemed to defy the very acoustic stillness it was shrouded in. Hours passed under the oppressive sunless sky, perpetually veiled by the dense, low-hanging mist. The silence grew heavier, more pervasive, now accompanied by a subtle, almost inaudible pressure building behind his eardrums. He tried to dismiss it as a psychological effect of extreme sensory deprivation and prolonged acoustic paradox. But the sensation persisted, a dull ache that resonated deep within his skull, mirroring the rhythmic thump. His biometric suit registered erratic neural activity, localized spikes in his auditory cortex, often associated with processing sound even though there was no external sound to process. His portable hydrophone array drones after hours of sweeping. The vast, silent lake finally locked on to a major, undeniable anomaly. Not just zero ambient noise, but a consistent rhythmic subaquatic frequency emanating from deep beneath the lake's bed. This frequency was not geological. It was fluid organic, like a vast pulsating signal. And from its very core, the thump intensified to a palpable throb, along with a faint luminous pulse captured by the drone's exotic energy imaging. Not heat, but pure contained resonance. A deep, impossible abyssal blue, like the deepest part of the ocean, but somehow terrifyingly intrinsically sentient. He whispered into his recorder again, his academic detachment fractured by awe and profound dread. The source, it's deep, beneath the village's original church, emitting a non-thermal luminous pulse, a deep organic abyssal blue. The rhythmic beat, it's emanating directly from its core. The pressure, I feel it clearer now. It's like the lake is listening. The folklore mentioned the singing lake. This is it. This is the source. This is what truly drowned Coldwater Creek. A cold metallic taste filled his mouth, a taste of burgeoning existential dread. Driven by a dangerous, irresistible combination of scientific imperative, fueled by the sheer impossibility of his discovery, and a burgeoning icy fear that chilled him to the core, Elias located the precise epicenter of the pulsing abyssal blue. Anomaly. It was a section of the lakebed marked by crumbling stone foundations and remnants of submerged wooden structures. The water here was utterly still, heavy with a profound earthy scent, now tinged with a faint cloying sweetness like stagnant water mixed with something vaguely electrical like ozone from old transformers. The abyssal blue light pulsed from within the very lakebed, a vast subterranean core, its rhythm a slow, deliberate beat that seemed to synchronize with his own. He noticed peculiar, intricate patterns within the exposed silt and rock, not just natural, striations but swirling inclusions that resembled frozen sound waves or perhaps trapped fragments of acoustic energy. He moved cautiously towards the source, deploying his submersible drone. Its powerful lights cut solitary beams through the murky depths. The water beneath him felt unnervingly soft, despite its liquid appearance, almost like swimming through vast, taut membranes. He could hear his own heartbeat, unnaturally loud, echoing only within his own skull. But then other sensations began to intrude, not from outside, but from within his own mind. Faint, fragmented memories, half-formed thoughts, almost whispers of impossible melodies, rising and falling with the abyssal blue pulse. It was profoundly disconcerting, like his own auditory memory was being played back to him, distorted and amplified, woven with other alien impressions. The drone reached the center of the anomaly, where the abyssal blue glow was brightest. Here, amidst the wreckage of the village, something impossible was located. It wasn't just bedrock. It was a vast organic mass, pulsating softly, half buried beneath. The lake-bed, its surface slick and vaguely membranous, radiating the abyssal blue light. It was massive, stretching out of sight into the unseen depths. It had the distinct rhythm of the thump, thump, thump he'd felt. This was the source of the lake's endless pulse, a colossal organic receiver. And then, just beside the pulsating mass, something horrifying came into focus. Not debris, but a humanoid figure partially submerged within the glowing, shifting organic mass, as if caught mid-absorption. Its face agonizingly clear, despite the faint abyssal blue glow, was contorted in a silent scream, its hands outstretched, fingers splayed. It was a man, likely one of the lost villagers from 1948. His features were distinct, his expression raw terror. He was not merely a corpse. He was perfectly, horrifyingly preserved, his essence suspended within the living tissue, a testament to an unspeakable fate. Elias stared, horrified. This was beyond anything he had conceived. Not geological, not even acoustic, biological. He activated his bioscanner, pointing it at the organic mass of flesh. The readings were impossible. Not inert, not dead. There was persistent bioelectrical activity, faint, erratic, but undeniably present. The mass wasn't just preserving. It was sustaining. Against all logical judgment, compelled by a desperate need to understand, Elias reached out a gloved hand and gently placed it on the surprisingly warm, yielding surface of the organic mass encasing the man's arm. The moment his glove made contact, a searing jolt, not physical, but purely mental, shot through him. His vision blurred, filled with a blinding flash of abyssal blue light. And then he was plunged into a torrent of raw, unfiltered sensation. Not words, but a rapid-fire sequence of images and emotions. The sudden crushing cold of deep water, the agonizing sensation of his own voice being ripped from his throat, the horrifying realization that his very essence, his capacity to be heard, was being consumed, absorbed by the entity around him. And then, a single agonizing, voiceless scream, echoing in an absolute, suffocating void of forgotten sounds. The vision lasted only a fraction of a second, but it felt like an eternity. Elias recoiled, tearing his hand away from the living mass, gasping for breath, his heart hammering against his ribs. The internal thump, thump, thump in his head intensified, now accompanied by fainter, more ethereal tinkling sounds from within his own mind, like a distant broken bell. This was not a passive entity. This was a living sound sink, and it held conscious agony. The mental jolt from touching the organic mass reverberated through Elias, leaving him gasping, disoriented, his mind reeling from the torrent of borrowed terror. He stumbled backward, his suit's internal systems screaming warnings about neurological overload. The chilling images of the villagers' final moments, the crushing silence, the horror of acoustic annihilation, the voiceless scream were burned into his retinas, echoing in his thoughts. The profound acoustic void of Lake Serenity seemed to press in harder now, no longer just an absence of sound, but a conscious, palpable presence. The subtle thump-thump-thump from the lakebed intensified, transforming into a deep, resonant bass note that vibrated through the hull of his airboat, through his very bones. It felt like a colossal living drum beating out a vast, patient, predatory rhythm of oblivion. He spoke into his recorder, his voice hoarse-strained. November 25th, 2:30 p.m. Direct contact made with organic anomaly. Experienced immediate, intense psychological feedback. Shared subjective experience of acoustic negation. The entity, it captures sound. It preserves the absence of noise. The mass is not inert. It's a living filter, absorbing all vibration. My brainwave patterns are erratic. My mind, it feels stretched, muted, silent. He paused, listening to the new, deeper bass note. The tinkling. It's still there, faint, rhythmic, from within. He forced himself to calm, to analyze. The data streaming from his bioscanner pointed at the living mass was impossible. High concentrations of complex biological polymers interwoven with unknown fluid structures, and persistent high-level bioelectrical signatures far beyond typical cellular decay rates. These were not dead organisms. They were suspended alive in some terrifying, agonizing state of soundlessness. The entity was a living, sentient biological machine capable of absorbing and retaining the essence of life in its final panicked moments of utter quiet. As he moved carefully through the submerged ruins of the village, avoiding direct contact with the most intensely pulsating patches of the organic mass, the bass note deepened, becoming a vast resonant symphony that seemed to emanate from every surface. The water itself began to shimmer, subtly distorting his vision. He started seeing fleeting ethereal images projected directly into his mind's eye, not memories of the villager he touched, but other fragmented acoustic experiences. A child's laughter briefly appearing in the swirling water, then twisting, stretching, fading into abstract light. A terrified woman running her hands across her mouth, her frantic cries, muffled by the encroaching silence, felt through his own skin as the water swallowed her voice. The agonizing surrender of a massive ancient church bell, its solemn tolling. Slowly consumed by the living silence, its centuries of meaning compressed into a single overwhelming pulse of defeat and quietude. The living mass itself seemed to actively draw him in a seductive, irresistible pull emanating from its slick surface. It wasn't a physical suction, but a deep subconscious urge to step into its perfect stillness, to merge, to understand the profound emptiness, the agonizing peace it offered. His gaze kept returning to the horrifying beauty of the pulsating mass, its internal abyssal blue glow, promising ultimate truth, eternal tranquility in acoustic oblivion. He felt a profound sense of weariness, an aching desire to simply lie down on its yielding surface, to let the hum wash over him, to become part of its vast living memory of vanished sounds. His own will felt strangely weak, the boundaries of his self eroding under the constant mental assault. He activated his specialized acoustic dampening sensor, aiming it at the surface of the most vibrant patch of the organic mass. The readings were bizarre. The mass itself was generating a subtle internal acoustic anomaly, actively bending and absorbing sound waves, creating a localized event horizon for noise. This anomaly wasn't a byproduct of physics. It was consistent, regulated, almost like the internal process of a vast biological system. This was a living organism, a colossal predatory entity, slowly consuming the very concept of audible existence. And then he saw it. Streaks of deeper, more vibrant abyssal blue within the mass, forming intricate pulsing patterns that shifted and flowed like vast, unseen neurological pathways. This mass was the entity's body, its flesh, its mind. He realized, with a horrifying clarity, that the legends were wrong. The village wasn't just drowned. It was being sung silent, and everything within it. A terrifying realization solidified in Elias's mind the living organic. MASS was not merely a biological anomaly, but a vast predatory entity, slowly consuming and assimilating the very fabric of sound and perception, transforming living vibration into its own monstrous unified form. The constant low bass note vibrated through the water, growing more insistent, drawing him closer to the heart of the submerged village. The mental echoes were no longer random fragments. They became more focused, more personal whispers, not of the victims, but seemingly directed at him. You seek harmony. We provide. Be absorbed. Be unheard. The words were formless, yet undeniably present in his thoughts, a seductive, invasive presence. He stumbled forward, driven by a desperate need to find evidence to prove this impossible horror. He saw it then, an active acoustic absorption zone. A section of a submerged cabin ahead seemed to ripple its wooden walls, subtly absorbing light, then releasing it, defying visual stability. A child's rocking horse inside briefly appeared to be, moving with a gentle rhythm, then snapped back into stillness, making no sound. Objects like scattered pots or abandoned toys would momentarily flicker out of existence, then reappear a foot to the left as if their acoustic presence was stuttering. It was happening in real time. The process was slow, agonizingly so, but inexorable. His solid perception of reality slowly warped, becoming part of the living, pulsating organism. Further ahead, closer to the largest section of the organic mass, he saw something even more disturbing. A large wild fish, its form shimmering, half-submerged. In the glowing, shifting organic mass, its powerful fins still free, but its head, gills, and tail already solidified into translucent abyssal blue flesh. Its eyes, wide with unspeakable agony, reflected the terrifying beauty of the mass's glow. The bass note resonated from it, and Elias felt a surge of raw, animalistic terror, a desperate, futile struggle erupting in his mind as he inadvertently brushed his gloved hand against a low-lying section of the living mass. The fish was not dead. It was trapped alive in its silent flesh tomb, experiencing eternal, disorienting agony. It's ongoing. He gasped into his recorder, his voice a raw whisper. The assimilation, it's not a past event. It's happening now. It's absorbing living organisms. And they are aware. They're conscious within the flesh. Their sounds are gone. He could feel a faint, almost imperceptible cold radiating from the very air around him, a subtle decrease in the ambient temperature that his suit registered, consistent with a vast biological process consuming energy. The sweet, cloying scent was stronger, almost suffocating. As he watched the horrifying transformation of the cabin, a fine, almost invisible vapor began to rise from the surface of the living mass, shimmering with faint abyssal blue motes. It was not mist, it was a diffusion of the entity's essence, a fine, almost gaseous form of the living tissue itself. It swirled around his suit, clinging to the visor, making his vision subtly blurry. He felt an unsettling tingling sensation on his exposed skin around the cuffs of his gloves and the unprotected areas of his neck. It was a subtle stickiness, a faint tackiness, like dried, invisible residue. He tried to wipe it away, but it seemed to cling stubbornly. Then, from the largest section of the living mass, the lake bed itself seemed to undulate. A wave rippled outwards from its colossal bulk, not of silt, but of pulsating abyssal blue flesh, smoothly extending, seeking. And then from the surface of the mass, several translucent flexible tendrils, gleaming with internal abyssal blue light, slowly emerged. They were too perfectly formed to be natural roots or muscle. They were too purposeful in their movement. They moved slowly, sinuously, like probing fingers extending towards the flickering objects, towards the absorbing fish, and terrifyingly towards him. The entity is not just consuming passively, it is reaching. The mental intrusions intensified, now accompanied by fragmented, distorted voices, not from the air, but from within his mind. Terrified, pleading whispers joining the entity's pervasive bass note, joining the quiet forever. He felt his own legs heavy, his movements sluggish, as if the very essence of the entity was beginning to seep into his joints, slowing his reactions. The terrifying realization solidified the entity wasn't just physical. It was a vast conscious sound eater, a trap laid for centuries, and he had stumbled into its very core. The translucent abyssal blue tendrils, gleaming with internal light, extended from the vast organic mass, inching across the damp ground towards Elias. Their movement was slow, deliberate, utterly silent, yet filled with an insidious, unyielding purpose. The mental intrusions roared in his mind, a chorus of fragmented pleas, and the entity's vast, unfeeling command. Listen, consume, be assimilated. He could feel a subtle, unsettling cold radiating from the tendrils, a cold that promised not comfort, but absorption into oblivion. His own will felt fragile, battered by the constant psychic assault. He stumbled backward, desperately trying to evade the slow, methodical reach of the tendrils. His suit's internal systems screamed warnings about high-frequency energy absorption. The air around him was now thick with the fine, shimmering abyssal blue vapor, clinging to his suit, his skin, permeating his every breath. The sweet, cloying scent was overwhelming, almost intoxicating. He risked a glance down at his gloved hand. A faint, almost imperceptible absence of texture was beginning to form on the surface of his glove, a subtle matte film that looked disturbingly similar to the initial stages of sound absorption he had observed. He frantically tried to rub it off, but it clung, subtly hardening. It was already spreading. The entity was not just reaching for him, it was actively consuming him molecule by molecule, his very perception becoming the preliminary layer of its terrible sound-devouring flesh. "It's on me," he gasped into his recorder, his voice raw with a terror that transcended scientific curiosity. "The abyssal blue vapor it's infesting. I'm numbing. My voice, it feels gone." He tried to speak louder, but only a faint raspy whisper emerged, quickly swallowed by the oppressive silence of the water. The massive organic mass from which the tendrils emanated began to pulse with a renewed, brighter, abyssal blue light. The rhythmic thump-thump-thump intensified, rising in pitch, becoming a low, echoing hum like a vast, empty chamber filling his head. The mental intrusions were no longer whispers, but loud, horrifying echoes of agonizing screams, thousands of trapped minds crying out in an unspeakable chorus of terror and eternal consciousness. This was the raw, unfiltered song of Coldwater Creek, composed of the final moments of all it had consumed, eternally cycling in acoustic oblivion. Elias knew he couldn't fight it physically. The tendrils were slowly but surely gaining on him there, fleshy tips almost touching his boots. The realization that he was facing a vast sentient predatory consciousness, one that consumed life and processed sound, hammered into his mind with brutal clarity. He was just another lost echo for its endless void, another vibration consumed by its terrifying living silence. His eyes darted around the crumbling, submerged village, desperate. His gaze fell upon his autonomous drone lying discarded near the edge of the deep anomaly, having crashed earlier due to the intense energy interference. Its outer shell was already partially coated in the thin abyssal blue vapor, but its internal recording systems, designed to be hardened against extreme environments, might still be functional. If he could reach it, if he could transfer his final, horrifying data, his last observations, before he became completely assimilated. It was a desperate, illogical hope. He lunged towards the drone, forcing his stiffening limbs to move. The abyssal blue tendrils, sensing his movement, accelerated their fleshy tips, striking the water just inches behind him. The echoing hum of the lake intensified to a piercing whine, causing agonizing pain in his skull. The mental screams of the trapped souls became a deafening chorus, drowning out his own thoughts, pulling him towards the edge of madness. He reached the drone, his stiff fingers fumbling with the data port. The absence of texture on his gloved hand was visibly thicker now, his movements becoming slow, deliberate, almost petrified. He slammed his suit's data cable into the drone's port, initiating an emergency upload. The drone's small indicator light flickered green, then blue, then, with a final desperate surge, glowing a steady abyssal blue, mirroring the light that consumed the lake. Data was transferring, his knowledge, his warnings. But the tendrils were upon him. They wrapped around his legs, his arms subtle at first, then firm, pulling him gently, inexorably towards the vast organic mass of the sound-eating Lake Serenity. He could feel the abyssal blue film spreading rapidly across his entire suit, over his faceplate, slowly obscuring his vision, turning the world into a single blinding, shifting haze of impossible silence. The pervasive echoing hum became a part of him, vibrating through every cell. The mental screams of the trapped souls were no longer external. They were his screams merging with the chorus. His final thought as the abyssal blue flesh fully encased. His faceplate, his eyes wide and staring, his body frozen mid-struggle, was not of fear, but a horrifying, agonizing clarity. He was Lake Serenity now, and he remembered every sound. And he was the silence. And beneath the unnaturally still waters of Lake Serenity, a new voiceless echo joined the silent chorus forever, ringing from the depths of Coldwater Creek.